Howdy, everybody. Howdy, Humanities 2, Shasta College. Humanities through the arts, through the history of our collective stories. How y'all doing out there today? Today's the first day of summer, and it's hot, and it's going to get hotter. So here we go. Hope you're staying cool. Here we are in the second week of summer course. Hope you all saw the announcement yesterday. The first paper has been announced, essay number 1, and it goes into pretty good detail of what I'm looking for. You're going to write about one of the artists in the list. Vincent van Gogh, Michelangelo, Jackson Pollock, Alex Neil, and Andy Warhol. Pick one and research on that person. Now, I listed documentaries. I think all of them have something there I post them on modules. Watch the documentary, take notes, read the book, our textbook. Hopefully they'll have it by now. You should. So you want to read chapters 2, 3, and 4, the short chapters. They're not that big of a deal. It covers what we're covering, what your paper's going to cover. It might not cover all those artists, but it covers most of them in brief, and you get a good thumbnail sketch of those artists. You'll have to go deeper detail though in your paper. So what I'm looking for is not just a bio, copy and paste job from Wikipedia. In fact, I don't want you to use Wikipedia. Don't quote from Wikipedia. It's too easy, and sometimes it's not accurate. So find other sources. There's a ton of information at these artists out there. That's part of the challenge of the papers, to do the research, because it is called a research paper. And it is not a like or dislike essay, like a review of this person. No. You're going to thoroughly research who they are. And you're going to talk about not just their bio, their stats, when they were born, when they died, and all that boring stuff. I'm talking about the times they lived in, the times they were doing their work in. For example, what was the background of Andy Warhol? Well, he was born in Pittsburgh in the 1920s. Depression, grew up in the Depression. He was born with an awkward skin disease that made him even more awkward and shy, and he hid. And how did he hide? Well, he hid behind a persona and his artwork. He moves to New York City. He was raised in a very religious family, and Russian Orthodox, and that was profound on him, to the point where it, in his early childhood, gave him an outlook on life. He was also homosexual that he could not express in those dark times. And so he wanted to be an artist. He had a flair for graphic art. Went to New York City because that's where you go to, in those days, maybe these days too, to be famous and to find yourself. And he found jobs at doing graphic art for department stores, and he was pretty successful at it. He was still had to hide his sexuality. By now, he's losing his hair in handfuls. He's a very young man, and it makes him even more shy and reclusive. But then he discovers himself. In the early 60s, things are starting to open up. You can come out of the closet more than ever before, especially in a progressive city like New York. And He started dressing more provocative. Instead of trying to wear a toupee like a lot of guys do, um, and trying to make it look realistic, he didn't. He made it look absurd. But by doing that, it was a great statement on the whole persona that we all do. We all start a persona. Um, do you have a persona? Are you working on it? Who's an influence for you? My influences are all rock and roll stars, people like Ray Davies from the Kinks or Joe Strummer from the Clash, and filmmakers like Hal Hartley and David Lynch, Coen brothers. And so you start sort of taking on their style of doing things because they've taken their style of doing things from other people in the past, whether it's from rock and roll, from Elvis Presley to the Beatles to filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock or John Ford, or artists like Warhol. And you develop it over the years and it becomes who you are after a while if you are totally engaged in it, um, or not. But Warhol created this persona. In the meantime, he was creating uh, a revolution in art that they defined it as pop art, and um, he he was influenced by consumerism, advertising, television, celebrity. That was all important for him, and so he started doing his first work that made him famous with the Campbell soup cans. Maybe you've never heard of that. You will if you watch the documentary. And people go, "Is that art?" That was their problem. They didn't get it. He was commenting on the culture that he was seeing around him, like all of the artists I'm asking you to write about were. And that's part of your paper. What is the environment that's helping them create? With Warhol, it would be coming out of the Depression in a very repressed Orthodox religion, being homosexual, being new to the city, having this horrible skin disease. But what's also going in the 50s, things were popping in New York in the 50s, it's post World War II. Success, conservative times politically. Um, we're in Cold War with Soviet Union. We had the threat of the atom bomb always. That plays a part in Warhol's thinking, his art. Um, then along come the 60s, and John F. Kennedy gets voted in, and things start looking a little bit upbeat. It's not so conservative times anymore. Music is changing. We're coming from early rock and roll into the Beatles and Rolling Stones and things like that. Warhol's right there the whole time, but then tragedy strikes when JFK is assassinated. Now there's a dark turn in America. Civil rights are happening. African Americans are getting treated like crap, and so they're people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are leading the way to change, and it scared a lot of people, a lot, and it led to their assassinations. That's what we do when we don't like something; we kill it in hopes it's going to go away. Well, it may stop it and may derail it, but it never goes away, folks. You cannot kill an idea. You can kill a person, but you can't kill an idea. We have not learned that yet. We've tried to kill communism. We've tried to kill Muslims in the Mideast. You cannot kill an idea by killing people because there's always somebody there to come up and continue the struggle. So Warhol's in the midst of all this change in America, and he started a whole revolutionary art movement based on his art and celebrity and our obsession with consumerism and celebrity. We still are. Look at Instagram. Warhol famously said, everybody is going to be famous for 15 minutes. Now, when he said that, it sounded absurd. This is 40, 50, 60 years before social network. Well, now we have the Kardashians. There's a good example of somebody who's famous for doing what? You explain it to me. What exactly is that they've done to earn their celebrity? Okay. Well, now people don't want to be famous for 15 minutes, they want more. That's why we have TikTok videos and YouTube videos and everybody trying to be some sort of influencer. And that's important to get 40 million hits on a silly TikTok video. I guess it means something. Whether it does or not, that's up to you. So Warhol was at the front of all this revolution. He influenced the culture, and that's radical. So there's a little bit of Warhol thing, and anything I mentioned in there should be in your paper. Van Gogh was a sad case of a tortured artist who was probably schizophrenic, at the least bipolar, but this is in the days before they knew what that was or even how to handle it. He was in and out of mental institutions, and he was painting as if his life depended on it because it did. He was born and raised in the Netherlands, and he painted. It was more than obsession. It was perhaps the voices in his head talking to him, perhaps God talking to him, and he was destroyed by it, and he killed himself. And he only sold one painting in his lifetime. He sold that to his brother, Theo, I should say, who supported him all his life. Watch the documentary. There's a lot of stuff on Van Gogh out there. He is the epitome of a tortured artist. Now, what was he painting? Well, he's painting the beauty around him, but he had no beauty in his life, folks. But he wasn't painting a realistic beauty. He was painting an impression of that beauty. And that's the radical revolution that he brought onto the world. He wasn't painting in a realistic manner. He was painting an impression of how he felt about the beauty. And people didn't understand it in the beginning because they said, well, hold on, this doesn't look like a tree that I've seen. Well, his answer would be, but it's the tree I see. Now, he's considered perhaps one of the most influential, brilliant artists of all time. His paintings are priceless. He painted only for 10 short years. Very sad life. Never fell in love. Never had any much affection. He only got affection from prostitutes. He was always searching for his place, for a family, for a connection. Never found it. But he painted like a house on fire, and we have his paintings. I had the opportunity to go to Amsterdam. That's in Holland, folks. And there's a museum there called the Van Gogh Museum. And it was only a couple blocks from my hotel room. And it will blow your mind if you ever get to go there. Because you go there and his works, the amount of body of work he put out was phenomenal. For a guy who really didn't have much training, he started late in life. And a guy, do you see the torture in the painting? Hmm. Now, we know how he died. He committed suicide. So that's always there. It's always hanging on. But there's so much respect for humanity and so much beauty in his work that cannot be denied. Yes, it's tragic that he died so early and he was always in pain. Now, at the other end of the street in Amsterdam was the Rijksmuseum, which is their big famous museum. Um, and that's where they house all. I didn't ask you guys to do Rembrandt because it's too much. There's 100 painters I'd like you guys to research, but we can only do so much. Uh, I didn't even ask you guys to write about Rembrandt because I chose some painters that changed the face of art. Rembrandt did too, but he was successful in his lifetime. Um, so was Michelangelo. So was Andy Warhol. But others like Alice Neal had success mostly later on in life when they were old or when they died. Anyway, Michelangelo, all of Rembrandt's is in the museum down there. Famous paintings like the Night Watch. If you ever have time, go there. In 1 2 mile area, all of Van Gogh's works and all of Rembrandt's works. And you could go to Rembrandt's house where he lived and painted and walk the streets. Amsterdam's also the place where Anne Frank hid in the attic for 3 years from the Nazis. Her and her family lived in an attic until they were ratted out by a neighbor and they were put in concentration camps and she died in there. But she wrote this famous diary. You could go to that house too. So here's this little town in Holland where all these incredible historical people existed. And it's still, you can still see it, you can still feel it. It's there. The light that Rembrandt painted with, the light that Van Gogh was painting with is there. And the darkness of Anne Frank's life is also there. It's a wonderful city. I hope to get back to it one day. So these things are out there. So that's a little bit of how I want your papers to go. Look at what's surrounding how the world looked to Van Gogh. Yep, that's part of the humanities. Learning the culture that these artists were living in at the time that influenced them. They're not living in a vacuum. They're going to the store every day, they're going to the pub at night, just like we're doing now. Except for we don't go to the pub every night. I wish we did. Anyway, okay, then there's Jackson Pollock, was born in America, very nearby here, actually. He was born and raised down by sort of where Paradise in Chico area. He was severe alcoholic who was painting like crazy, didn't know have what to do much. He was studying painting, and he, of course, went to New York City, and he found his way there, like they all do. And he, and along with some others, like Willem de Kooning, Picasso, before them, they were very influenced by Pablo Picasso. He started creating this revolution called abstract expressionism. His paintings, they're called drip paintings. He would drip painting. He would drip paint from a container onto a huge canvas. And as he was doing that, he was drinking and smoking himself to death. But for about 5 or 6 years, he was famous. He was selling his paintings for a lot of money. This would be the early 50s, 1950s, when everything was changing. We came out of World War II. The country was building fast, freeways and highways and everything else. And Go on, Del Rey. I'm working. You can't come in here now. Go on. Jackson Pollock, along with several others, started a movement. I'm sorry, I was interrupted there. By abstract expressionism, these people weren't painting realistic looking paintings. They're painting the fury, the passion, the loathing, the love, their extreme emotions into the canvas. What's going on in the world? Same thing that Warhol was living through. We're into the Cold War, conservative times in the 50s, but and jazz was happening. Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and that fueled Pollock's paintings. Early rock and roll was starting with Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. That was fueling the revolution in the world that these young guys felt they had a conduit to some sort of passion and truth. And that's what they're trying to accomplish. He died stupidly. He got drunk. We don't know if he really killed himself, but possibly. He was in a car with two other women driving recklessly, and he ran supposedly into a tree on purpose, killing himself and one of the women. One of the women survived. So he was driven by his demons and his passions, and his paintings are nobody's ever seen anything like him. I had the chance to be in New York City several times. Museum of Modern Art. Please go there if you have a chance. MoMA. And if you see a Jackson Pollock in real life, in person, up close, sit there and let it sink in, absorb it. You will see everything you need to see. And you will walk away understanding. If you look at it online or a picture on your iPhone, you won't get it. Michelangelo was someone's paintings I have not seen in purpose because I haven't been to Florence. I've been wanting to go there. He was thriving in Florence, Italy. Florence, Italy was essentially the starting of the Renaissance. Remember, I told you last week they got sewage. Then they started the sewage system, and that took waste product out of the city where people lived, and people started to get healthy again. Living with sewage makes you sick. Living with clean water makes you not sick. And Michelangelo thrived in that. And he worked for the Pope. He painted religious paintings, the Sistine Chapel. If you ever get, I've seen only the documentaries and things like that. I have not been there. Before my time runs out, I need to go there. And so do you. He was successful in his time. He had commissions from wealthy people and religious leaders who helped pay artists. That's how they made their living in those days. But look at the world he was living in. It was the beginning of the Renaissance when people in the world were starting to understand the world they lived in, not just the little town they lived in, because people were traveling now. They're seeing other cultures and then they're bringing this information back. And because people were starting to live longer and be healthier, they prospered more. There was more commerce. There's more trading with uh, uh, different countries, different cultures, and so that's what started the Renaissance. Was the fact that it was people were opening up to the world around them, not just the small town they lived in. And Michelangelo was painting that world. The last one on the list is Alice Neal. There's not a lot of women out there, folks. Jackson Pollock's wife was one, but I didn't put her down here because Alice Neal is somebody I'm really affected by. She's in the book. She's in one of the chapters. She lived until the 1980s. Um, watch the documentary on Alice Neal, and you'll understand a woman's perspective in this male-dominated art world. And she's drawing figurative drawings that weren't popular at the time, but really powerful. They weren't models like high fashion models. They looked like real people. She'd get people who were overweight, skinny people, people who didn't look great. Like we all have to be looking great now on Instagram. These people look like humans in all their beautiful flaws. And she would paint them. So it's uncomfortable sometimes to look at it because we only want to see supposed beauty. And that's something she rebelled against. She was a feminist long before the word even existed. And she painted what she wanted to paint when she wanted to paint it, whether it was selling or not. She stuck to her vision. Finally, she was recognized with it, and now she's really recognized for it. The world she's living in, she died, she's essentially born in the early 20th century, died well into the 20th century. And so she went through all that. We have the Depression, Prohibition, World War II, the Cold War, Korean War, Atomic War, Kennedys, Beatles, Rolling Stones, the 70s, disco, punk rock, yeah, Led Zeppelin, film, Godfather, Apocalypse Now. She lived through all that. And so that was the world that she was living through. And so if you write about her, you need to write about the world that was influencing her. And why would she be so specific and staying the course? If you that's what you're looking for. And I'm not saying you need to find the answers. Just struggle to find the answer and try to come up with something that sounds reasonable. I just don't want you guys to do a quick bio on these people. I want you to get at why they mattered in the times and why they still matter. Why did we still look at these people? We're still influenced by Andy Warhol. We're still influenced by Jackson Pollock. He's been dead for 60 years. They had a profound effect on our culture. Yes, they were painters and artists, and they had that much profound effect on us. And therein lies the beauty and the truth. Hopefully, you guys can find that in your paper. Talk to you next time.